Hey, and welcome to another episode of Maritime Foam. I'm excited to do another review. We're going to talk more about the Nerf Hyper line and talk about the Rush 40. I'm excited to talk about Hyper, not because it's my favorite line by the looks of how things are going, but because it is brand new and it's fun to look at new things. Nerf Hyper are these tiny rubbery rounds and are the successor to Nerf Rival, which is one of my favorite ammo types. We're going to look at the Rush 40, which is probably the most interesting in the Hyper line. We talked before about the Siege 50, and my review is a little bit mixed, kind of neat. I like the look of it. The Rush 40 is cool because it's a sidearm, and being able to hold 40 rounds in a sidearm is pretty darn cool. Before we open this up, I'm just going to talk about what are some comparable blasters to the Rush 40. One of the first obvious choices would be the Strong Arm. The Strong Arm fires 6 darts out of a cylinder, can be holstered. One of my favorites from the Mega line would be something like the Magnus, which holds 3 in an internal clip. In the Ultra line, we have the Ultra 5, which holds 4 shots. Comparable in the Rival, we would have the Chronos, which holds 5 in an internal clip. And since we're doing a comparison, I think it's fair to mention the Roundhouse, which holds 15 rounds. It's pretty big for a sidearm blaster, and pretty big and pretty hard to call this a sidearm class blaster, but the Artemis does hold 30 rounds. So I just kind of bring this out for the next comparable for something that holds as many rounds. So let's get back to the Rush 40. Let's unbox this and take a look at it. So in the box for the Rush 40, you get 30 Hyper rounds. I don't know why Nerf is doing this with this Hyper line where they're giving you less ammo than it actually holds. Luckily, I do have some leftover rounds that I haven't lost yet from my Siege 50, so I'll be able to top this up to full capacity. So just looking at this blaster, it looks really nice. It's painted on both sides. It has this faux carbon fiber look to it, which is really, really nice. And the biggest thing about this blaster from an advantage point of view, and the reason why it's probably the only Hyper blaster really getting any love from the community, is that it holds 40 rounds. 40 rounds is a ton for a blaster of this size. Comparing it to the Chronos that I showed earlier, 5 rounds, 40 rounds. I'm going to fill this up and we will fire it and see how it works. I was going to fill this up off camera, but it took me a minute to figure out how to get into it, so I might as well show how it loads. The loading door is in the back. It's not the clear, transparent flip up like in the Siege 50, so it was a little bit confusing. I mean, to be fair, it may not be the easiest to load, but once it is loaded, it has a capacity way above any of the blasters that I showed here, with really the only one being close being the Artemis, which really you can't call a sidearm. It is definitely a little bit tricky to get these in. One thing to note is that every Hyper blaster does come with safety glasses. That's because at 110 feet per second, we're over that 100 that we come to expect from Rival. We are 40 feet per second over the 70 that we expect from Nerf Elite blasters. And we're even over what we expect from Ultra, which Ultra blasters kind of fire anywhere around 100 as well. I'm just going to see how heavy the prime is on this. Oh wow, the whole thing comes back when you prime it. That's kind of weird. First shot, nothing came out. There we go. That's another thing with these Hyper blasters, because they're hopper fed, gravity fed. You can very easily, if you're tilting it back, no balls will load into the chambering mechanism. At least with this one, because the priming handle's on the top, you're likely to tilt it down to prime it, and it's a pretty firm prime. It's not super easy to do. All right, so I'm going to be firing at Bessie on our backyard shed from 30 feet away to see how the accuracy is. I didn't have any jams, kind of firing it in the backyard. I fired off 9 rounds. I was able to recover 5 of them. They bounced all over my yard and back from behind where I was firing. Rival balls do have a bit of a bounce for sure, but not like hyper rounds. And darts tend to just kind of hit and bounce a little bit from where you fire them. So that's definitely something that really works against hyper for outside. One question I always like to ask with any blaster is it cool? It's not always about, is the blaster practical, or else I would just have 100 strong arms and I would do everything that way, or there'd only be a handful of blasters. This blaster is definitely cool. The other question I like to ask is this good for kids or adults or both? This feels more like a hobbyist blaster or an adult to me. The blaster hits a bit harder too. You know, a really small kid below 12, below 12 or 13 isn't probably going to want to be hit by this. It's going to require all new ammo. I think it's going to get lost very fast. It bounces all around the house. For outside, good luck finding them. It's going to be really hard to recover these little rubbery rounds, and it might be a concern if you have pets as well. I know from looking online there are different Nerf groups that are not allowing hyper to be used in competitive games too. I will probably be looking into a 3D printed piece from Drac. The YouTuber went over a little while ago where he's replaced this piece to add a hop-up into the front to kind of level out the performance of this blaster. A hop-up is on the rival rounds. It's just a little piece of plastic that when the ball exits, it puts a little bit of backspin on the ball and straightens out that trajectory. They don't have that hop-up in the hyper blasters for some reason. So he designed a 3D printed version, and it looks like that'll be on FoamBlast shop at some point sometime soon. So I will probably get that and modify this hyper blaster, and I can see myself using this indoors only when I think I can recover the rounds. So that's kind of my overview on the Rush 40. It is a neat blaster. The idea of so much ammo in a sidearm is really cool. I don't have as much hope as some people do for hyper. This is very blasphemous, but honestly, I almost prefer ultra to hyper. At least I can find them. Anyway, until next time. It didn't chamber around. Bye.